So our next chapter, chapter 2, called The Beginning, Reference. This section covers everything that you need in order to get yourself pulled together to begin the process of modeling. So all too often, novice modelers of characters will just begin the process of modeling, and they'll forego the research step. And that's what this is all about. This is collecting data about what it is that we're going to create. These are the plans. This is the layout. This is the drafting stage, if you will, before we build the building. And this is actually just absolutely critical. So I've been fortunate enough to find this artist you see here. His name's Piper, and he lives in Montreal. I mentioned him earlier, and I found him through Twitter, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. And I have offered my services of modeling. In exchange, he has a character to tell his story with. So, in 2005, I have this little quote right here that says, "An artist is only as good as his or her reference library," said by Bay Rate in 2005 at a ZBrush convention in San Francisco. It was one of the first little user group conventions that the Pixelogic company had held, other than going to SIGGRAPH. And there were some fantastic artists there, and Bay was one of them. And Bay Rate is the artist who more or less defined the definition of box modeling, and is one of the key, or is the key modeler of the character Gollum from the Lord of the Rings films and the other creatures in that film. And I'm sure he's done many great things, but he likes to keep a low profile, so I can't find much information about him. So anyway, fantastic artist, and really spoke to me, whether indirectly, but he spoke to me whether he knew it or not. So let's take a look at the next slide. So, reference. Where do we begin? What is reference? Where do I get them? How do I manage my references? Which is actually not that often do people ask, how do I manage my references? But I'll bring that one up. You should be asking that question. Collecting and managing. So references come in various forms, and they range from raw anatomy photographs to meticulously laid out model sheets to live models and objects. References can be collected using a camera, scanner, 3D scanner, surfing the web, or hiring a model to sit in your studio. Also, don't forget about books. I have great photographic examples in the Anatomy for the Artist by Sarah Simblett, Dynamic Anatomy, The Artist's Complete Guide to Facial Expression and Anatomy, and an Atlas of Animal Anatomy are just a few books in my library. Not to mention the references that I've gathered from online sources. Managing the reference is as simple as managing a folder on your hard drive with photographs. Also, there are several options to manage images online, such as Instagram, Pinterest, which seems to be the favorite, Tumblr, and others. Using Pinterest, you can organize your reference images to be public or private. I really like that option. Okay, so here's Pinterest, and I just started using it. Actually, it was Professor Betty Nelson at ARC that recommended this, which her students were recommending, and now I'm using it. And so it's a really great way to collect reference, and you can collect them both as public and private. I've started a bunch of private ones because I don't yet know what I want to be public, so I'm really just using this as a repository for my personal interests. Let's take a look at how this works. Alright, so here's Pinterest. Make an account, set it up, make boards, search for images. It's relatively easy to figure out as you go. But here's a couple of search tips for you when you're pulling things from the web. Here's Google, and this is a keyword search that I felt actually found things that we need. Reference, sheet, anatomy. And then add any two words to that to narrow it down. So let's say, oh yeah, and one other thing. Make sure that your reference is of large size. So there's a lot of interesting images out there, but the resolution on them is just crap, and they're not usable for actually referencing directly in Maya. So they can be useful as reference that you just look at. That's one thing. But to actually use as a model sheet to actually model from that's a whole nother thing. So you need to have fairly large images, and I would recommend well above 1024 if you can. So get up higher than that and see what becomes available. And now you're more guaranteed of saying, oh, okay, this is going to be usable. All right, so let me show you how to add one of these to Pinterest. Okay, this is a pretty decent character sheet, high resolution, 1800 by 957, well thought out, clean lines. This person clearly knows how to communicate to a 3D artist, so might actually be a good idea to contact this person. Okay, so let's visit this page and show you how to bring this to... It looks like there's several here. This is good. So let's copy this, go to Pinterest, go to the board I want, click on the board that I want to add it to, click Add a Pin. It'll give you a choice to upload from your computer or the web. Click the web, and then paste in the URL, and click Next. Okay, in this case, where it's not letting me grab the image, I'll show you the workaround. So let's close that. So I just found it again, and then I'm going to open up a browser, and I'm just going to pull it straight from there. So I'm going to go to here, I'm going to add it to my source images where I've got other character sheets. I'm just going to drag and drop it here. Then I'm going to go back to Pinterest, go to my board, click the board I want to add it to, add a pin, this time from my computer, pick the image, and search my source images, and search out that board. It'll upload it, and pin it. And there it is. Now it's been added from my computer. Let's try out this Google feature of searching by image. So let's grab any one of my anatomy pictures like this one here, drag it to Google, drop it, and see what comes up. That's pretty cool. So now I've got a whole nother set of images to pick from. Then I'm just going to filter this one by higher resolution, large. And I really like this one, the changes of proportion over time for the male figure. I'm going to visit this page, copy that link, go back to Pinterest, go back to my board, go back to anatomy, click add from the web. And there they are. So I'm just going to add all of these. All right, let's continue on to the next step. So network with concept artists. This one is so very important, and only recently in my career am I really getting this myself. And I guess it's because I'm some lone teacher teaching at some community college. But this one really is important. So if you're in the industry, you're probably already doing this. But even if you're in the industry, it's not unthinkable that you'd still be disconnected to your fellow artists. So a great reference collecting strategy is to make friends with artists who are interested in seeing their own work in 3D, and specifically 2D artists, concept artists who just don't quite have the ability to do it themselves. Become their friends, become their partners and their collaborators. So this relationship could not only yield experience, but much more you cannot imagine. It's entirely realistic that someone that you're helping to make their work in 3D will become the director at some studio 5-10 years out from now, and you're best buds with them because you've been making work for them. So that's a door that's been opened. Okay, so use Twitter, Facebook, DeviantArt, and other websites to find artists who need you. And that's how I found Piper. I found him through Twitter, through this connection and that connection, and eventually came across his model sheets. I expressed my sincere like of his work, and I wanted to make it, and he found that to be acceptable, and excited to have someone do it for him because he was struggling. Next is the issue of IP and public domain. So intellectual intellectual property, or IP, is a big deal, and there's no way to lose connections in this industry than to take and use another artist's work without their permission. With that in mind, always ask first, get permission, work out a royalty plan if you need to, then spend your time making the design in 3D. Now, the opposite of intellectual property is public domain. For example, when a person is arrested for a crime and has their mugshot taken at this police station, that image becomes public domain. And you may or may not, depending on the county you're in, have to actually file paperwork based on some research that I did. You might have to file paperwork to get access to that, but with Google searches you'll find that there's quite a bit of content out there. So going on here, think about all the people that have lost their face to public domain, and then go get a few mugshots for your game or film. Ask Google, how are mugshots public domain images, and see what you can find. It's very interesting. Also search for other public domain imagery. When searching with Google or another search engine, don't rely on it to determine if an image is public domain. Double check your facts. So if you find things through a search engine that you believe are public domain, just double check that. It's entirely possible that you're looking at someone's piece of artwork where they're recreating mugshots or something of that sort. So again, double check your facts. That said, look for public domain imagery of all kinds, and you don't have to worry about royalties or paying anything to anybody. Alright, on to the model sheet. So when working with a concept artist, you can request a model sheet. The concept artist might already have something called a character turnaround. At first glance, the model sheet and the character turnaround seem to be the same. Yet the difference is the leveling lines used to guarantee the model is the same for each orthogonal view. The model sheet has a front, back, side, top, and the top is more for longer characters than they are tall, like animals or anthropomorphic, and a 3/4 view for the character. Each is carefully leveled out using guidelines. It may also have a color palette and other notes required to describe the character according to the designer's plans. And let me share with you a model sheet that's just been given to me by an artist that I'm going to be working with for this training. So this has been given to me by an artist I'm working with in Montreal. His name's Piper. And he's given me a front, quarter front, side, and back view. I don't really need a top view because he's taller than he is wide. And the only thing that I would need at this point would be perhaps I would need texture samples of what the fabric might be. It depends on how much detail he really wants. Definitely a color palette so that my colors are consistent. And he will be delivering to me, as he's already stated, a facial expression sheet of all the various expressions that this character is supposed to have throughout the course of the short film that he's creating. And notice the distinct leveling lines so that I can bring this into Photoshop, cut it up according to the horizontal lines, and bring those into the individual views in Maya. And I'll go through that process when the time comes. So if you don't have a concept artist and you're creating a model from photographs or from your own drawings, you'll need to create your own model sheet. Go through the process of leveling it out using guides in Photoshop or whatever program you have. The various views are carefully leveled out using guides. Adjustments are carefully made so as to not harm the proportions of the character, yet make it easier to create in 3D. So you might have to do a little liquefying here and there in Photoshop to just tweak things a bit. This is assuming, of course, you're not working with a character, with a concept designer, so you of course are free to change it as you want because it's your content. Another option is to go online and search out for characters, find a character that you like or several characters that you like, find out which artist made them, and then get permission from that artist. So here I've gone to Google and did a search for character turnaround. And I was actually surprised to find quite a few, many unique characters, probably from the various students over the years in the various programs around the world. And many of them are ready to go to be modeled in 3D. And I would just be very careful that when you grab these things, even though they've put it on the web and they're probably fully aware that their character at some point will be stolen, that you go and take the time to find this artist, have a conversation with this artist, let them know what you want. Chances are they want to have their character made in 3D if they didn't do it themselves already. A lot of these designers don't know how to do it in 3D, but they're very eager to have someone in 3D to visualize it for them because they want to be in that kind of environment, a game or film environment, but they just don't have the skill themselves. So seek out those people, collaborate with them, and help them following that networking that we just discussed earlier. In the meantime, collect all the characters that you like, bring them into your Pinterest account or wherever you want, store them on your drive, make a note of where you found them or who made them, and then try to collaborate with them in the future. So the next thing to create would be, or to gather, would be the reference sheet. The reference sheet supports our model sheet. So the model sheet's what I'm going to be modeling directly from, as I already stated. The reference sheet is just a whole bunch of stuff that supports it, like color references, texture references, anatomy references. So for each model sheet, you may also need supporting reference to solve anatomy, clothing, and hair issues. Make a library of reference specific to that character or create a general library in which to pull the images. Don't forget the textures. We're not just modeling a character, but we're also painting one. Include as much texture reference and then add those textures to your general texture reference library as I've described in the 3D Texturing Volume 1 videos. So there's this, for those of you that don't know, there's this texture reference library, which is just this archive of gathered images used for texturing anything, and they're categorized into things like rock, wood, paper, skin, and other things, metals. Okay, so once you've collected a substantial amount of references, consider creating a reference sheet. This is the same as a sprite sheet used for 2D animated video games. You can categorize and organize the reference sheets to suit the needs of the project. And I actually understand that the program Picasa, I think that's Google's program. It's an image uploading to the Google Drive. That program, I understand, will automatically create model sheets. So a model sheet basically is just, this is not a model sheet. This is not a reference sheet. This is a model sheet for this bird here. But a reference sheet is just a bunch of packed images. So it's just a bunch of images that kind of pack in here, and there might be a couple of pixels in between, and you just pack them in to a format so that you don't have to load up one reference at a time. You can just pack them all into one big reference and just pop that up on your second monitor. Okay, so I just popped over to Google, searched for reference sheets of anatomy, and so this cat reference is kind of like a reference. This is basically a reference sheet for cat anatomy at different poses and such that people can poke around and look for. And there's something here for some dragon. I don't know. It's probably a reference for some kind of homemade video game. They kind of look like model sheets, but these really aren't good examples of reference sheets. I'll poke around and see if I can find a good one. Okay, that's pretty decent. So a reference sheets of different dragon heads. That's pretty nice. That's useful. This is a good reference sheet. Several different examples of arms, shoulders, legs, general proportions. Very nice. I'm going to grab this one and put it in my Pinterest. Okay, so I just wanted to show you how this works. I'm at Google searching for some reference sheets. I found this good one. I then did a little middle click there to visit the page. So I pop over to the page. I'm going to copy this link, pop back over to my Pinterest, and I'm going to say add a pin. I'm going to say from the web, and then paste this in. It seems like too many steps. And then this will automatically search that site for the things that I want. And you'll see they're listed right here. So I'll say pin this one. And I'll also pin this one. Oh, and it wants me to give a description. Yeah, that's fine. And no, I don't need to see it now. And make sure this one was pinned. Okay, so that's cool. Yeah, so now when I go back to my page with my anatomy board, I can see they're there with the description I put in there, and I can always edit those things later to make it more clear and organized. I also wanted to show you that I can build my own reference sheets and model sheets. So I have drawings done by former artists, the artist that I'm working with right now, things that I found on DeviantArt, throughout, on the web, and things that I've scanned from other books. So here I have what's coming up, say like this one here. This is basically a paint over from a scan from the Anatomy for Artists book by Sarah Simblett, and I draw the wireframe over it. This is where we're headed next. So you're probably wondering, when do we actually get to the modeling part? Not yet. This is so very important to lay down the proper groundwork. So let's go on to our next slide here. So the next step is to visualize topology. So draw what you think the topology will become over top the references, like a sheet of celluloid on an overhead projection. Ideally, you have references to draw your topology over long before you begin the modeling process. This step ensures, for me, I am able to successfully visualize the wireframe. This step also removes reservations I may have with getting started. And I can't tell you how much this really removes any sense of fear that I might have in getting started or of the unknown. I have literally just sat and stared at the cube at the beginning of the modeling process, wondering, how is this going to go? This hasn't happened to me for a long time, but back in the beginning, I would sit and just stare at it. And I remember that feeling, and I know what you might be going through. So we're going to do some drawings over top of references to help us and assist us in this process. And we're going to start with the face loops. All right, so let's go through a visualization of the topology step to assist us in determining what our first moves are going to be. So this is a scan from the Anatomy for Artists by Sarah Simblett, and it's a drawing that's not symmetrical. So I want to make it symmetrical to make this process easier for me. So I've turned on, I've unlocked my layer, and I've turned on my ruler, so that's just Control R. I'm going to drag out a guide and drop that about midway on the nose. Next, I want to marquee half of the image, so I'm going to grab the right-hand side, and it should snap to the guide. And then I'm going to tap V, and then I'm going to hold down Alt and click and drag, and that will drag a copy of what's inside my marqueed area and just snap it to the other side. And it should not, no, okay, be careful with that because it will overwrite whatever is there. So let's just do a Control J to separate that onto its own layer. There we go. So we still have the original half just in case we want it. There we go. And then let's go to that new layer, marquee again. Marquee that piece. And let's move it to the opposite side. And then hit Control T for transform and give it a negative 100% for the width, and you'll see that it flips it right around the other side. And be sure to hit return, hit enter to finish the transformation, and you can hit Control D to deselect. So I can marquee one side and do my painting on this side, and then do the same process and invert it. Mirror and invert to the other side for what I'm going to draw. So everything that I'm going to draw from this point will be stuck inside this marquee. Yeah, and you can actually see just how quite asymmetrical this drawing is when you unhide the top layer and show the one below. You can see it's pretty bad. All right, but they're trying to show different things on each side of the face, but that gets confusing, really confusing. Okay, so let's talk about major edge loops. All right, let's start with the primary, the very first edge loop to concern yourself with when making the head. And this is when working in Maya. So this is going to be the face loop. So this is the number 1 edge. And this is the edge that separates between the stiff part of the head and the flexible part of the head. Okay, and it actually goes under the chin, so I'm going to do a dotted line here to indicate going under the chin. So it's going to be on the hairline, across the temple, just before the ear, on the backside of the jawline, coming underneath the jaw, just before the throat, and back around again. So that's your face loop. That edge loop separates between everything that's flexible and everything that is less flexible. Okay. So let's go on to the next one. The next one is the muzzle loop. And this one is how you're going to begin the definition of the nose. And it's going to start where the bridge of the nose and cartilage meet. And this is going to be just on the inside, just on the outside of the mouth. And it might come on the front side of the chin, like that. It might go under the chin slightly, depending on the shape of the face or the character, how weird the character gets. So that's your muzzle loop. Something you're going to define right in the beginning is going to be ear and eye. Okay, so ear is going to be really, really simple. We're not really going to make the ear at first. It's just going to be this hole. And I'll just draw a square here for that hole. And the eye, again, is going to be a hole, but it's going to have a minimum of 8 edge loops running into it and literally following the ocular muscles. And it's going to have a minimum of 8 coming into it. So there's 1. So let me grab a different color here, orange. So there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's your minimum. And it's probably going to go up to 16. So it's probably going to double, but in the beginning we want to keep it simple. It's just something to be mindful of as you're developing the eye socket. And then the eye socket, let's go back to red. The eye socket's going to be perimetered between the face loops. So there's going to be boundaries. There we go, something like that. And it's going to boundary the face loop. And the face loop is actually not an edge loop in my mind. It's actually a poly loop. It's actually 2. So I'm actually imagining 2 going all the way down, all the way around, and to the other side. So we're looking for something like that. The J hook. The J hook is an upside down J that defines around the nostril, and it's going to come around. It's going to be on the inside of the muzzle loop, and it's going to come on the underside of the mouth. It's going to end on the inside of the nose. So let me undo that. So let's do a dotted line. So it's going to end on the inside of the nose. That can be relatively tricky to create, but I'll show you how to get that done. And then of course the mouth itself. Let's do mouth, and that's going to be minimum outside loop of the lips, and then of course the inside loop of the lips, which is going to look like a line, and then it's something mid-level to create the shape of the lip. This next edge that runs from the eye to the mouth, and this one is always the upper outside corner of the mouth will always go to the outer underside corner of the eye. It will always connect there. Always. Every single time. Even on an animal with a long snout, you can start it this way and then extrude and add more to the snout. But it's always going to start here. Definitely for humans. Works great. It's going to make a nice fleshy cheek. And then there's going to be neighbors that go with that. Actually probably be more like this, like that, and there'll probably be another one here, and this one will probably go on the inside of the mouth there, or it will connect to the nostril there, and then these will connect to the nostril here. Okay, looking really good. Remember this one, the eye to the mouth. Very important. Okay, another one. I'm running out of room here, so let me just make this a little bit smaller. Number 7. This one is the brow. Furrowing the brow. So the brow edges really are just more face loop edges, really. There's about 7 of them. But the brow is this U shape, and it'll run on the inside of the nose, and it'll run in between the eye loop. Okay, and this is a very old person, by the way. To have this eye, I don't know if you can see my cursor, to have this run right here, that's a very old person. It's actually, the flesh would be much tighter. It wouldn't sink so low. So there would actually be more room for this. But if this is an older person, then these edges would be scrunched up pretty good. And this is going to run right back to the ear, just like that. It's really simple. It's a U shape right here. It's going to run in between the muzzle loop and the ocular loops, and it's going to go straight back to the ear. Every single time. Consistently, I've had that successfully work every single time. Okay, let's just make this a little bit easier to see all the way around so it's usable for you later. And I'm going to marquee it. Control J to put it on its own layer. Marquee it once again. And then I'm going to translate it, V, and just move it to the opposite side. Let it snap into place. And then invert it, Control T, and then use -100 on the width up here. And it will flip around, and be sure to hit Enter to finish that, and Control D to deselect. And go ahead and hit E to erase, and just make a bigger eraser. Just erase out some of this stuff. Okay, cool. So if you were following along, you have a pretty decent guide. It looks like I could just bump that over just a little bit. Let's just move that. Just nudge, nudge, nudge. Yeah, that's pretty good. That looks pretty good. So this is, and we could compare this. Let's compare this to wireframes that have already been successful. Oh, and before I compare it to wireframes that have been successful, understand there's still so much more of the wireframe to draw, but I'm not trying to draw the whole wireframe. I just want you to see the primary edges isolated, the ones that do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to deformations for the face, the ones that define the boundaries for all of the others that are going to be laid in. Okay, so now let's compare it to something else. Okay, so let's compare it to my greater success, my self-portrait, and I'll just tear this window off so I can look at them side by side. So just doing a quick draw over here. I just want to identify the edge loops, and you can see without much study, you can see the various edge loops that I defined already. There we go, there, and up here. Here's the face loop that goes all the way around underneath. The J hook. The mouth. The muzzle. Outside corner of the mouth to the outside corner of the eye. You can see how I kind of swung wider on that one because I really could have gone wider on that to really show the fattiness of the cheek. And then the multiple loops here. And let's just hide this for a moment. Let's turn this down and take a look at this up close. What I really want to see is where the edge loops run between the, let's make a new layer, where the edge loops run between the eye and the nose. So they don't all run up to the eye. It's more like just this one here and here and here goes up to the eye. And then this one could have come down here, but instead I decided to reroute it to the nose there. Both should work. and then the remaining go straight up to the nostril, and the remaining come down here into the nostril. And they probably loop around and stop dead on the inside. Cool. So it really pays off when you're looking at an artist's work, another 3D modeler's work. Look for those wireframes and study them and figure out what's going on there. Oh, I actually forgot a nice edge loop here that I see on my chin that might be more dominant on others is this U shape, this one right here. This could be very, very useful. We could actually draw that one in right there. That one would be very, very useful. And the ones going to the mouth, just go back to the ear, down the neck, down to the neck, and that's about it. And then the ear, well, that has some special problems. We'll deal with those when we get there. I was going to add this chin line off camera, off recording, but I decided, no, I probably should do this on recording so it's entirely clear where it goes. So you see there's these 3 yellow that define the mouth, inside mouth, middle mouth, outside mouth. The chin one is going to run between either or, most likely the J-hook line, between the mouth and J-hook line. So it'll run like that. And I'm going to throw out a guess. I haven't looked at my model in a while. Actually, let's go look at the model. Let's see where I put it. All right, so that was pretty easy. I just ran it to the back of the neck, and I ended it in a triangle for some reason. Not sure why I did that. I probably should just let it run across. But that's pretty cool. And I have this one right here hooking in the opposite direction, which I'm sure serves a purpose because I put it there. And there's its neighbor, so there's 2 of them. 1, 2. And these, yeah. And okay, yeah. See, so there's the mouth, the bottom side of the mouth. Here's the U for the chin, and then here's the J hook. J hook. Oh, okay. So I brought my J hook way down here. Way down here. So these are just a bunch of muzzle loops. Oh, okay. That makes sense. So I've just got a lot of mouth loops, and I'm running that one in between. Okay, so popping back to Photoshop, that would equate to being not there, but here, between bottom side of outside of lip. This is the bottom side of total mouth, and that would hook down, upside down U, and it would just run. It would run back towards the neck that way. Cool. Sorry about that, but I actually hadn't seen that one in a while, but I think it's going to work out well for us. Cool. And then I'll just mirror this over again. Okay, and here it is finalized. So this one was kind of easy because it already had lines for me to follow. Of course, they don't go exactly where I want them to go. I draw cross grain on them if I need to. But it's a little bit easier to see because I can see lines that indicate muscle tissue. Let's go to something that is less easy to solve. So an actual photograph of somebody. So this is an essential step. So make sure you're on a new layer and draw the very first one, which is going to be the face loop. Now you might be thinking, okay, Matt said to follow the hairline, so you might be feeling like it should look like that, or actually follow the hairline like that. You could. I have done that before, but it's just as well, because you can paint in the texture, it's just as well to go across like this. But if you are absolutely certain you're going to do a hair simulation, you might want to follow that hairline exactly, or build a second object from your first object that your hair object is generated from. That's more what I would do, so that I can keep this part here nice and simple like that. So that's your face loop, and there's actually going to be two of them, and that's going to separate the back of the skull from the front of the face. Okay, ocular, something like that. It's going to have 8. Okay, and something we can see on the side here that we couldn't see before is that the ear hole right here, that's going to have about 4 to 8 divisions running into that one too. That one division connects directly to the eyeball. It might, it might hook down a little bit or have a curviness to it, but that's going to hook to the eye every single time. You stick to that, and you'll always know where this one goes. That's going to go over the ear. It's going to go over the back, something to that effect. And then the one back here is going to run to the front of the collarbone. A total of 3 of those. And those are going to connect back here somewhere. Okay, so again, we couldn't see those earlier. You're going to basically spider web out from the ear hole. I call it spider webbing because I can't think of a better word. Yeah, that's going to go crossed. That's probably going to go across. And then these eventually, after they get messed around with the ear, they're eventually going to connect across here somewhere in the back like that. This one, all the way around, we can do a little bit better. And this one, a little bit better on that. Come on. There we go, something like that. And then that one's going to come across, and you might have one more running right here. It comes all the way up. Okay, and then you've got the U shape. I'm going to erase that one. Give the U shape here. That one's going to run, it could run to the ear, or it could run back here, or it could run, it could go, start a little higher. It could go on the lower side of the neck down there. That's an appropriate place too. Bridge for the muzzle, that's going to come across and closer to the front side of the chin. And J hook, top side of the chin, inside mouth, outside lips, outside total mouth, and then that U shape we talked about. It'll probably run there. Outside corner of eye to outside upper corner, outside lower corner of eye to outside upper corner of mouth. And then the rest of them fall into place. There might be a star, a 5-edge star running there. And then additional edges running here. And then more running there. And there might be something coming across here. And again, this is just coming from the experience of doing these sorts of things, but as I actually lay them out, things tend to shift. Things tend to move. So it's reasonable that things aren't going to go exactly. See, I can't quite see what happens here, but it's reasonable. It might come across there. There might be another one running here. At some point there's a 5 right here. At some point there's a 5 right there. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. There'll be a 5 here. There'll be a 5 here. We can take a look at the one in Maya and see if we can find them. So there's a 5 right there. There's a 5 right here. That's okay. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how to do it. So let's go on to a body example. Okay, so when you're trying to figure out the wireframe for the body, remember a couple of simple rules. Um, you want to identify surface topology. So there's a lot of things that act on the body underneath deep tissues, deep muscles, bones, fats. These things affect the skin, which is on the surface. So we really want to focus on the surface for our topology, but it may require an understanding of what's happening underneath to make that happen. And you may need more of this or less of this. So, if we're making Ranma for Ranma 1/2, and we don't need as much of this. But if we're trying to create World of Warcraft cinematic, then yeah, we're going to need more of this anatomy conversation. Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind, and let me zoom out here, and that is bones, fats, muscles, skin, and I'm going to add one more to this because people used to call this the BFMS, so I'm going to add one more, T. That's tendons. Tendons. Okay, so these are the things that have kind of visual landmarks, and we might not need most of them because there's this step, there's this process I've been talking about that we do in ZBrush, where we're going to paint the displacement map or the normal map. So a lot of this surface information could actually be painted into a map. So what we really need is a mesh that will deform and support animation and be fast, process quickly and efficiently. So, major landmarks to identify in the body are as follows. So there is a box here. So let's just draw a box here. Actually, let's do that marquee thing. Okay, so that box I was talking about. So there's a box in here that when we begin this. So you just imagine this is the beginning of your model, just the box. And that's the torso. What we're really going to do is we're going to take this point and this point, and we're going to move it in like that. So it's going to look like, let's go on a new layer. It's going to look like this simple 45-degree cuts like that. Really simple. And then from there, we're going to extrude outward. And what this is going to do is make a clean transition from torso to shoulder. So now we can do things like split it all the way across. And build up the topology that we're trying to achieve here. So in the beginning, it's very boxy. It looks kind of terrible, actually, and but ultimately, we are actually trying to get to this diamond-like topology, which really, I think at this point, instead of doing the draw over, I'll just pop over here to save some time. And let's hide her dress. Okay. And let me apply a different material just to make this a little easier. Okay. And look for these key edge loops that I have running throughout the body. That's a good one. Running the full length of the arm, across the shoulder blade, down the buttocks, down the leg, all the way down to the toes. Fantastic. That would definitely be done near the end. But I'm looking for ones that, yeah, like that one right there, how it lives right there. And in the beginning, that was actually as simple as cutting across right here. All right. So let's get another layer. Let's hide that one. So looking at this topology, I'm really looking for something that just hooks around the shoulder, nice and soft, and hooks around the shoulder this way to the sternum. I believe I have that one too. So let's pick one from the sternum. That one perhaps? Yeah, there we go. See how it hooks around? Good. It's a little lower on the back side than what I have here. So I actually came like from here across and hooked. Something like that. Either way though, it just depends on the musculature of the character. And then we saw earlier these run the full length of the body. So it's running from digit, backside, all the way around, all the way over here, all the way down on the inside of the butt, and all the way, switching programs here, and all the way down the back, and that hooks around to the toe. Looking at the neck, certain things just kind of dead end, right? So this one dead ends from the mouth and somehow hooks around to the nipple. Probably unintentional. That wasn't the one that I was looking for. Here's one that I'm looking for. Definitely. So because of the breast, because of the fatty tissues, and because of the way it tucks, the dress tucks and pushes on the breast, this edge loop gets swung up a little higher. But this is basically defining rib cage, all the way around bottom side of pectoral, outside of arm, back to the lower side of scapula. Here we've got rib cage running to the bottom. So the purpose of these edge loops is to articulate the full range of movement of the character. I don't know if all 3D modelers take such great care at kind of deciphering a layout for this, but I did, and I felt that it was worth the effort. And some of these are just far easier to see at the lower levels of the model. And I have other versions of this character at different points in modeling that we can investigate later on. Let's look at the hip. I kept the hip fairly simple. Just running across from top side of hip to top side of buttocks, and then on the inside of the hip. Pretty simple. I tried to keep that simple. I've had problems there before. I've had problems with knees before. I kept the knees simple. I decided I wanted to have the ZBrush solve a lot of those problems. And of course, I showed it earlier, but I'll say it again. Toes and hands had some really good solutions there, where I swing the edge loop back around and I keep all that detail localized. And for each toe, it's offset. So this toe is offset from that toe, and so on and so on. Same thing up here on the hands. Let's grab that. And same thing here. So here I've got it hooking around. And then detail areas around fingernails. Simple little details there, just extrusions, pushing and pulling on the surface to get the fingernails. Try to keep the digits simple. Transition from thumb to palm, I find that one to be more difficult. You can put as much detail into that as you like. Just make sure that your geometry is high enough to support it. Here I've got an edge loop circling around to build the webbing between, and I believe I have one between each finger for the webbing. if I was careful enough to do that. I think I did. Maybe I didn't bother with the webbing. I just pulled on the vertices a little bit. I probably just pulled on them a little bit. And that edge loop traverses the length of the body, which is just cool to see how that one treks the whole length of the body. Oh yeah, and notice the heel. Notice the heel is actually the box just turned, kind of rotated a little bit and continued the extrusions. So the box extrusions end right about there, and that's where the toes begin. It's a thicker foot and heel because of the design. It looks awkward, but it follows the design. Okay, so that's a closer look at topology and drawovers. So let's get to work putting together our references and starting our modeling process.